Greetings my fellow guitar fans, welcome to the channel. I'm thinking of this as my first proper video. What I hope to do here on YouTube is pass on some of the tips and techniques I've learned fixing and upgrading guitars. I don't do this as a job, I've just built up knowledge over a few years of working on guitars and picking up tips from luthiers. You can find many of those who have YouTube channels in the section Channels I Rate Highly. Everything's on a budget, nearly all the stuff you'll see me using in these videos is second hand, that includes this workshop. Most of my experience working on guitars has been making cheap instruments play better, basically because I couldn't afford a good one. Eventually I found out I could make a cheap guitar into one that played and sounded better than anything I could afford to buy new. This video is a BC Rich refurbishment, also upgrading and repairing it. Hope it helps.
That's not too encouraging. Oh. Schoolboy error number 1. Turn up volume pop. Still nothing. Oh. There's a hint of something coming out of the amp. Pretty convinced the amp's working. Definitely. I'm hearing a tapping there from the neck pickup. And from the bridge pickup. So in theory, I can hear something very, very faintly out of the amp. Second thing that immediately sticks out is the lining up of these pickups with the strings. They don't line up with the pole pieces of the pickups at all in the neck position. They do roughly in the bridge position, if you see what I mean. Hopefully one of these angles will show it. I wonder if that pickup is original, because the spacing is so wide compared to the strings. I just query whether that's another bridge pickup or just a pickup with a wider spacing. I can see some of these screws are really loose, well, not loose, but unadjusted in the bridge, so maybe that's because another bridge was put on and the bridge screws not screwed in every position. Maybe it's because the threads pulled through. I'm not sure. Don't know if you can see that, but that one's really quite high. Several of them are, well, at least a couple, don't look like they're screwed all the way down. Cheers. That's gone cold already. Awesome. General condition of the paintwork. It's quite an angular design, obviously, and as you'd expect, on the pointy bits, it's suffered a bit of battle damage. There's the odd ding in the top of the paintwork, the odd dent, it's cracked, the odd scratch, the odd scuff, but there's some crud, some legacy crud. General gunk and a bit of corrosion. Fretboard itself, I can see there's quite a dent just after the second fret. Running my hand up and down the fretboard, I was expecting to find some frets sprout, and I do feel some sharpness on the edges of the frets on my fingertips. Headstock is obviously missing a few bushings from the tuning pegs. Again, some battle scars around the edges. You can see that the high E is trying to get out of its slot. There's not enough down angle on the high E to to make that sit in the slot as it should do. Just looking at the edge of the fretboard, I can see the odd little ding in the edge of the fretboard. So, back of the neck. Don't see any evidence of cracking. In fact, I didn't see any evidence of cracking anywhere on the body. There may be some lacquer cracks underneath some of this dust, but we're not too worried about that. The object is to turn this instrument into something playable and restore some of the cosmetic condition. What else do we have? The odd ding, scratch, scuff on the neck, and some gunk that I'm sticking to. I would tend to put an oil finish on that to sort that out. No, I can't see any cracking in the headstock, which is good. Might be worth me popping this. This plastic is kind of contorted and distorted. I speculate that that's been reseated. Oh, that doesn't want to move. Crikey Moses. That doesn't want to play. Everything you're going to see what I use in these videos is all on a budget. So these things, work zone stuff, great for hobby use. Okay, what horrors are waiting here? Don't see anything wildly untoward. There's nothing obvious shorting out that I can see that might cause it not to be working in terms of what comes through the amp. So the earth and hot or live seem secure to the jack. Can't see anything obvious shorting out on the switch or pots. So there's a bit of a mystery as to why it doesn't make a noise at the amplifier. These are coming out very easily. I suspect that these won't bite when we come to put it back in. End up having to fix these holes. That's easy enough. Oh, that's quite nicely done. That's all looking good as far as I'm concerned. All springs are there. Good solder joint on the claw. Seems reasonably well adjusted. No worries there. Slightly loose. Strap buttons. Doesn't appear to be an original hole. I don't know if you can see that. Doesn't appear to be an original hole on top of the routing there to take the pickup, to take the cover screw, whereas it does here. So I speculate that came out the factory like this. Most peculiar, mama. If you're new to guitars, and I will talk in these videos about sort of a noob noob level. So if you're using these videos to help you in what considerations you should be taking before you buy a second-hand guitar or one from a charity shop or pawnbroker, then I'll add these bits and bobs into the videos. Truss rod sort of acts against the strings. The strings are trying to pull the headstock that away. So to stop a massive bow in the neck, you have most guitars will have a truss rod which runs inside the neck and tightens up to pull the headstock that way. So you end up with a very, very slight bow or flat neck. And you need that truss rod to be working. Because if it ain't, then you can either end up with a bow backwards or too much of a bow forwards, and the guitar just won't play very well. You might end up with a really high action. You might end up with buzzing frets somewhere down in the middle to the higher end of the fretboard. But of course, what you don't want to do is get into a whole guitar refurbishment, find out your truss rod has seized up and you can't make any adjustments. Make it one of the early things you check. Check the truss rod works. So I shall do that. I'm going to nuke my tea. There's a little hexagonal nut in there that will take truss rod, adjusting, what do you call it? Allen wrench, Allen key, X key. No, it's not quite the right size, but it is moving. So the truss rod works. Is it a dual action or a single action? I hear you cry. It's too stiff that way. So I'm just loosening it off now to see if it's a dual action truss rod. If it is, it'll go through a neutral position and start to tighten again. And I suspect it is. But it might not be. I'm starting to think that it isn't. Because I'm loosening and loosening. And I expect it to be starting to tighten again soon. And it's not. I'm going to say that that's a single action truss rod. And then what I don't want to do is loosen it too much so that the end of the truss rod comes out of the nut that's buried deep in the heel of the neck. And then I've got a useless truss rod. So I'm going to call that a single action truss rod. And that's okay. Because there wasn't a bow in the wrong direction. Sometimes they back bow and you need a truss rod to help it, as well as the strings, to a slight forward bow. But this one's okay. So it's just acting against the strings as I tighten it. It's trying to bring the headstock back. So we can work with that. Right, guitar fans. Oops. Continuing to look at this BC Rich, and time to have a look at the fretboard. I can get in nice and close, maybe, but yeah, you can see the tops of the frets there. And you can see that they're very flat. Now I wonder whether that's because it's wear. I speculate that's been filed at some point, just relatively crudely, I guess, to overcome any fret buzzing that might have been going on, or an attempt to do so. It doesn't appear to be too bad in other areas, but I noticed there's hardly any relief in the nut. I can get this thing to focus. very, very little clearance, even without fretting. Yeah. The string is resting lower, it's resting on the fret, and I fret the third. So that's not great. Looking at the other strings there, that one feels to me reasonable. If anything, it's a bit high. B string, about spot on. G string, about spot on. D string, too low, to 0 clearance. Got a bit of give, I think. A string, no give. E string, I've already done that to death. No give. So, problems there. This is by no means the worst of our problems. Sort of mark underneath the nut. The nut is slightly protruding. The nut is over to one side slightly, either that or it's oversized or the fretboard is shrunk. What's happening on the other side? The other side, the nut was made too large in the first place. It's not far off on the treble side. Slight cracking in the fretboard, the bass side of the bass side at the neck pickup, the neck end. Nothing to write home about. I did manage to get some sense out of the. If I turn the treble right up against the end stop, really turn up the master on this amp. I can hear something out of the damn thing. So I would speculate that there's some sort of earthing going on the tone circuit, maybe something like that. Cosmetically, the likes of that factors that thing to sort out. But I consider to be good YouTube videos on filling these with a bit of paint, some thick super glue to give it a sort of clear finish to it. So I think I might well the old ding in the neck and scratch in the neck. Scarf joint, of course. For some reason there. Electronics route cover sits odd. One of the most important things about the guitar is how straight or otherwise the neck is. Now I've got the strings off this BC Rich, and I'm guessing the bridge here is going to get in my way. Yeah. So it's important to know how flat the neck is. What I'm going to do is just sight along the neck, just by eye, and just see if I can just look at the edge of the fretboard and the edges of the frets, and see if I can see much of a bend or a twist. And it looks
reasonably flat. And it doesn't look like there's too much of a problem there. Sometimes when you look down the neck, you can see it's shaped like this, or it's not uncommon for there to be a twist in one side and not the other. But if you really look, if you look closely and pay close attention, look at the detail, then you can make an assessment of the neck. From memory, I don't remember if I flattened this with the truss rod as much as was possible. It's always useful to get a short straight edge on it. I'm just rocking it, see if I can hear any. You know what, you can also flex. If it's a steel rule, you can flex it. You should hear some sort of scratching noise as it rides across the tops of the frets, but I don't hear too much of that. So I'm guessing there's a bit of a bow in it at the moment. Somewhere I've got a fret rocker. Right, finally did find it. This is obviously a plastic one. It's basically anything that spans 2 or 3 frets, depending on where you are. Down here, that'll span 3 frets. Up here, that side will span 3 frets. And basically, you just walk it. Tapping on it just because if one fret is high, then there'll be a bit of an angle and you'll hear a tap, you'll hear a clicking. I feel something there. So this one, yep, that's high on the bass side, high on the treble side. It's flat in the centre. So that fret 11 is, or maybe, yeah, that's okay. So fret 11 is high towards the ends. That fret is high, probably there. 14. So in reality, it doesn't appear to be a great deal wrong with this neck in terms of how flat it is. Quite a nice figure in this part, or is it dirt? No, it's a figure. There's some reasonable figure in the flaming underneath the grime, until of course the scarf joint kicks in. That'll look quite nice once it's been sanded and refinished. Those are coming out very easily. Oh, the obligatory shim. Here you go. So this has got some sort of sticky tape as a shim. Oh no! Ah, beautiful. See, I knew this had been worked on. My gut feeling was this had stuff done to it. That's a bit of sandpaper, or fabric-backed sandpaper.
They don't put those in the factory. Well, to be fair, they may. It's unlikely. The reason that's in there, in case you don't know, is that if there's not enough neck angle, if the angle is such that the strings sit too low, then the tops of these adjusters stick out, and they can stick out into your palm as you rest your palm on the saddles, and they sticks in. So to avoid that, raise up the angle slightly, and then you can just lower the grub screws within the saddles, and that raises the saddles. The grub screws don't stick out the top anymore. So that's probably what that was for, I'm guessing. Get rid of that. And get the straight edge on it and have a look at it. I think I might have straightened this as much as is possible before. I really need to get a proper straight edge. So just by eye I can see there's a frets about 13 through 19, 17, 18, something like that. Looks like 20 and 21 are high. That's a gap, and then it's rusty on top of the nut fret. That's not good. Even so, from about fret 7 falls away. So it's a little bit up and down. Quite frequently that can be because the frets weren't put in quite right in the factory. It's handy to get a piece of paper and see if they. I've got some feeler gauges somewhere. So if you're buying a guitar and you want to check whether the frets were pushed in properly at the factory, then you can do this with a bit of A4 paper. But you're going to take a 0.15mm feeler gauge. So at the edges of these frets, that feeler gauge just butting up against the fret. Into the middle, and wants to get underneath, I can shove that feel gauge underneath. Fret 2 is okay. Fret 3, slightly high in the centre. Apart from the noise, it wants to grab hold of the fret. It wants to grab it, you see. See, that's not perfect anywhere really, apart from right at that end. That's going to be high. It's a bit high in the centre there. So all these, the majority of these frets have got some spots where it doesn't really want to grab there. That one's okay. Yep. So quite a few of these, quite a bit of this undulation might be down to the frets not having been quite driven in correctly or pressed in or whatever. So we might be able to do something with that. I'm quite confident, just by eye. I don't think there's too much wrong with that. There might be a bit of a back bow on it, on the bass side. Treble side looks like there's a bit of a forward bow, and that's fine. Very, very slight. Flat to forward bow. Bass side's definitely got a bit of a back bow, so there's a very, very slight twist in it. Nothing to write home about. Because there's plenty of meat in the frets, I can take out any undulation on the bass side. Just in the just the material that's in the frets. So I don't think there's any need to refret this. Some damage there to the fingerboard that I might be able to sort out by just scraping the top off that and drop filling some lacquer into it. Maybe trying to put a bit of steam on the fretboard will bring that dent out. Yeah, quite confident in that neck will be quite alright.
Greetings my fellow guitar fans, welcome to the channel. I'm thinking of this as my first proper video. What I hope to do here on YouTube is pass on some of the tips and techniques I've learned fixing and upgrading guitars. I don't do this as a job, I've just built up knowledge over a few years of working on guitars and picking up tips from luthiers. You can find many of those who have YouTube channels in the section channels I rate highly. Everything's on a budget. Nearly all the stuff you'll see me using in these videos is second hand. That includes this workshop. Most of my experience working on guitars has been making cheap instruments play better, basically because I couldn't afford a good one. Eventually I found out I could make a cheap guitar into one that played and sounded better than anything I could afford to buy new. This video is a BC Rich refurbishment, also upgrading and repairing it. Hope it helps.